giving their thoughts on what Xavier Leggette's going to be able to bring to the Carolina Panthers organization. And again, just having a younger, fresher wide receiver for Bryce Young to be able to throw to hopefully bodes well for the for the Panthers as a whole. And again, we'll see what they do when they get him in there. And again, Dave Canales is an offensive-minded head coach coming in there to to hopefully guide Bryce Young along, and he's obviously somebody that wanted Xavier Legette, as he said it the other day, and Xavier Legette's talked about it in his media availabilities leading up to the draft, that he was told by the Panthers that, hey, if you're there, we're going to take you. And again, we all thought initially that was going to be with the 33rd pick and the first pick of the second round. Obviously, they ended up seeing the opportunity to jump up, thinking that maybe a team like the Bills might try and grab him with that 32nd spot after, because the Bills had traded with the Chiefs, who were originally going to have 32nd spot. Chiefs went up to 28, I believe, and then the Bills had that 32nd pick and basically swapped with the Panthers. I believe it was a 5th round pick for as well that the Panthers ended up getting as a supplement for allowing that trade with the Buffalo Bills. But again, super excited for Xavier Legette. I think everybody collectively very happy for it. Obviously, he's a local kid just up the road in Mullins, and I think it's cool to know that his family is going to be able to easily go to his games up there, just up the road in Charlotte, and for the perspective of South Carolina fans, I do wonder, and let me know on the Firehouse Subtext on 803-404-6100. And maybe you are already a Panthers fan, and maybe you've been lapsed these past couple seasons because they haven't been all that good. But are you more, invested in the Panthers team, knowing now that Xavier Legette? I know he's not the first South Carolina player to be on the Panthers here as of late, but are you maybe even more invested in knowing that Xavier Legette's going to be playing for them, in addition to like Jadeveon Clowney, who they also signed as well? Does having that local connection of bringing Gamecocks in, add to your investment or your fandom in the Carolina Panthers now that Xavier Legette is going there? So again, let me know on the Firehouse Subtext line 803-404-6100. And again, we'll have reactions to this all day long, but super excited to see what Xavier Legette's going to be able to do at the next level with the Carolina Panthers. And hopefully it's a long and successful career in the NFL, regardless of if he's a Panther for life or if he goes to a couple different teams. Just so happy to see Xavier Legette being successful, and certainly appreciate everything that he did here in his time at South Carolina, and what he was able to do for this team, especially this past season, and being able to elevate them as much as he could. Again, a lot of struggles this past year, but Xavier Legette went out there and played his heart out each and every day. There's no denying that. As I mentioned, tons of things happened in the first round of the NFL draft last night. Some things expected, some things a little more on the surprising side. And unfortunately for me, my team ended up being the one that a lot of people were scratching their heads over what exactly they decided to do with their first round selection. I'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on the Game. As always, we're streaming live on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by our friends over at Integrated Media. You can also listen to us each and every day on the 1075 The Game app. Just go to the iTunes Store, give us a download, or the Google Play Store, and take us with you wherever you go, around the state, around the world, around the country. No matter where you are, you can have 1075 The Game and all of our great shows here with you. More draft reaction coming up as your Friday edition of the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head along with you here on the Game.
2024 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Michael Penix Jr., quarterback, Washington.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on your Friday morning, reacting to all things NFL Draft. Again, once again, congratulations to Xavier Legette on being a first-round selection there with the Carolina Panthers. That was the 8th pick of the draft with the Atlanta Falcons selecting Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington. Reading on ESPN this morning, there's a lot to unpack about this. And for anybody that is not familiar, I am, in fact, an Atlanta Falcons fan. I don't talk about it a whole lot. I mention it when I can. But for this past football season, the Falcons sucked for the most part, so they weren't really relevant enough to talk about. And when, as a fan my entire life, going into the draft, I just hope, one, the Falcons make the right selection, obviously, somebody that's going to pan out. And two, I just hope that they don't make themselves look silly over the course of the draft where people are pointing at laughing at them coming away from it. Unfortunately, I did not get my wish last night because everybody is looking at what Atlanta did and saying, huh? Mel Kiper, ESPN's draft guru, put out his list of winners and losers from round 1 of the NFL draft. And at the top of the list of teams that he said made head-scratching moves in round number 1, it is none other than Michael Penix Jr., one that he describes as a shocking pick. And gauging the reaction from my fellow folks back in the state of Georgia, especially ones that cover the Atlanta Falcons on the daily, everybody very, very surprised by this pick. And here's the thing. I don't dislike Michael Penix Jr. In fact, watching him this past season in Washington, I thought he should have won the Heisman Trophy for a lot of the season. Obviously, Jaden Daniels ended up having a phenomenal year and won it. Michael Penix Jr. certainly in the race there down to the very end. And I like the guy as a whole. And if he was somebody that you were maybe getting in like a 3rd round, if you're Atlanta, I can understand. But getting him in the first round and what you have to invest in him at that point does not make sense to me. Again, Michael Penix Jr. has been around college for a very long time. Was at Indiana, transferred over to Washington State following Kalen DeBoer. And again, last season was phenomenal. The year before that, very, very good as well. Like he earned his ability to be a reasonably high draft pick in the NFL. And if another team would have taken him, I would have understood. But in case you've forgotten, Atlanta just signed Kirk Cousins right at a month ago for a $180 million, $100 million of that guaranteed 4-year deal to be Atlanta's quarterback. And I can understand thinking about the succession plan for Kirk Cousins because he is 36 years old. He's not going to be the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons for the next 8 to 10 years by any means. 4-year deal. By the end of that 4-year deal, he's 40 years old. Again, you may get to the 3rd year of that deal, realize, it's starting to turn in the wrong direction to go ahead and want to move on to your next quarterback. And I can understand wanting to draft that succession guy maybe in this year's draft, but not in the first round. Use a 3rd round pick. Use a 4th round pick. I think Spencer Rattler would have been the perfect example of the type of guy that you would have gotten to fill this role by saying, okay, here's a guy that maybe we want to develop a little bit, allow him to sit behind Kirk Cousins for the next 2 to 3 seasons. Then when we think Kirk Cousins has reached his end here at Atlanta, we will turn the reins over to this young guy and allow him to carry us for however many years to come. Unfortunately, and the benefit of that is you are not, for one, spending your top valued pick on that guy for somebody that's going to be sitting on the bench for the next 3 to 4 years possibly. You're also not tying up a rookie deal with him of a first rounder. So you're paying first round money for a guy that is going to theoretically, barring injury, and again, Kirk Cousins has had injuries before, and that could be something that could rear its ugly head. But if all things go well, knock on wood, Kirk Cousins doesn't get hurt, you're talking about a guy that's going to sit the bench for 3 years, be paid a first round deal, and again, you're going to get to again, let's say Kirk Cousins starts for 3 years, doesn't get injured or anything like that. You get to the end of that third year where you have to decide if you're going to pick up his fifth-year option on his rookie deal, and he'll have theoretically maybe never even started a game. It just does not make sense to me. I was quite shocked when they decided to make this pick. And to make matters worse, apparently, the quarterback that you just paid 9 figures a month ago was not informed that this pick was going to be made. From all indications, I think it was Pete Thamel that said he reached out to Kirk Cousins' agent immediately after this pick because, again, everybody very surprised by this. Like, hey, did y'all know this was coming? And according to Kirk Cousins' agent, nobody within that camp was aware that this pick was going to be made. Now, from what's being reported on, it seems like new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, Raheem Morris, was very high on Michael Penix Jr., and again, if you're getting him in a second or third round, I get it. But spending a first-round pick on him, I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence in this right now because of the ripple effect that it has on your team. The Falcons are a team that needs help on defense. Nobody has had fewer sacks in the past 3 seasons than Atlanta. They haven't had a double-digit sack, they haven't had somebody on defense record double-digit sacks since Vic Beasley, the year they went to the Super Bowl in 2016. That was almost a decade ago. They need help on the defensive end, specifically bringing somebody off the edge. And all indications seemed to point to the fact that they were going to maybe go after a Dallas Turner or a Latu, somebody like that will be able to help you set the edge and hopefully get the quarterback a little bit more, affect the quarterback in these games. They have the lowest win rate coming off the edge on defense a season ago. Like, you needed help in that area, and the first round is the perfect place to address that, and they decided not to. Instead, spending it on a quarterback that's, again, going to be sitting on the bench for the next couple years. Or if nothing else, you could have traded down and gotten Michael Penix Jr. and gotten something else for that 8th spot, and again, theoretically gotten him later. There's so much to unpack from this. I just was very, very surprised by the decision. I'm not the only one. Again, the reactions I've gotten, and like I said, I'm very intrigued to tune in to some of my old Atlanta radio stations later on today and just kind of see what the reaction to that is going to be as a whole. And you never know how you feel about a new head coach. And Raheem Morris has been in the Falcons organization before. In fact, he was the interim head coach a couple seasons ago when they decided to fire Arthur Smith. Now, what has changed besides him going to L.A. for a couple seasons, including a Super Bowl win, as a part of that staff and where he was a few seasons ago when they had the option to retain him as the head coach after being the interim coach for almost half the season after Arthur Smith got fired. And now I'm hard-pressed to be it's hard to convince me that a whole lot's changed about Raheem Morris as a coach since then, a couple seasons ago. But we'll see. I'll just say it's not off to the most, advantageous start at this point with night one of the draft already being in the books. And I do think it was glaring, maybe is the best way to describe it, when they showed the Falcons' war room after this pick was made. And Terry Fontenot, who's the general manager, came over from New Orleans a couple seasons ago, was talking to Arthur Blank, in this video that we were able to see. And you don't have the audio from it, but the body language seemed to really suggest that Arthur Blank was asking the question about why they were making this pick. Why were they spending first-round money and a pick on a guy that, again, is likely going to sit the bench for the next couple seasons after just paying a huge sum of money for a veteran quarterback to fill that role that you did need to address this offseason. Like, there was no question the Falcons needed to get a quarterback, whether that be from free agency or from high in the NFL draft. And again, you did the first one. You got a guy in free agency. You didn't need to address that with a high pick in the NFL draft, but they decided to do that. And Terry Fontenot seemed to be really pleading his case with Arthur Blank, with a lot of kind of desperate hand movements and a lot of, the body language did not look great from a Falcons fan standpoint with with regard to what Terry Fontenot was apparently trying to tell, trying to tell Arthur Blank there. And look, is it a bit? Everything about day one after the day after the first round of the draft is overreaction to some degree, because we could get 10 years down the road and Michael Penix Jr. could be the best quarterback in the NFL, and they'll be looking back and saying, wow, that was an amazing pick. Didn't seem, great at the time, but it ended up working out for the Falcons. But it's something that has such a, the potential of it is a long-term payoff. Like you're not going to know how well this works out for years. And for all we know, that Raheem Morris and this team could lose constantly over the next couple seasons, don't even get to stick around Atlanta to see that pick come to fruition. It was just very confusing, very surprising, to say the least, on why the Falcons decided to do that. So, again, I don't get to talk about the Falcons a whole ton at length on these airwaves, because usually they're not at the fixture of headlines, but they certainly took their opportunity to make headlines last night with the first round pick in the NFL draft. My dad, who's been a Falcons fan since basically the very beginning, has always told me, regardless of the head coach, regardless of the ownership, the Falcons, well, they're just always going to be the Falcons. And I think last night was the perfect example of that. From my personal perspective, fingers crossed it pays off in the long term, but we will certainly see, and definitely hope they go defensive in the second round of the draft coming up tonight. Switch gears with baseball. Huge series this weekend with South Carolina taking on Kentucky, by the way. Go online to 1075thegame.com and fill out the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. You can win $1,000 this weekend if the Grand Slam is hit by a Gamecock against the Wildcats. And again, just head online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win. I'll be talking to Darren Hedrick, the play-by-play voice of the Kentucky Wildcats, coming up next as he gives us his insight to this Wildcats program ahead of the big series out at Founders Park. That's next. This is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday here on The Game. All right, and welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Friday morning. Very, very busy weekend out at Founders Park as the South Carolina Gamecocks get set to welcome in another tough opponent for what has been a up-and-down baseball season for the Gamecocks so far. Number 4, Kentucky coming into town. Pleased to be joined now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines by the play-by-play voice of the Kentucky Wildcats, that being Darren Hedrick. Darren, first of all, appreciate your time this morning. When you look at these two teams a season ago, very, very similar in a lot of ways, right around 500 in conference play. Both teams got the ability to host a regional and ended up playing in supers. The two teams that would go on to play for the national championship, obviously Kentucky ended up playing LSU, who ended up winning the whole thing. Going into this season, were you expecting Kentucky to have as good of a year as they've had so far?
Well, Tyler, first of all, thanks for having me on. And just to answer your question, I've been asked that a couple of times this year, and I think the best way to answer it is, did I think Kentucky would be good coming into this year? Yes. They had a core group of guys coming back from last year on the mound and around the field, position players in the lineup. They did a great job again in hitting the transfer portal to fill needs around the field and in the bullpen and in the starting rotation. So, yeah, I felt like going into this year Kentucky would be good. But to see them win 11 straight SEC games and start 15-1 was obviously very pleasant surprise. That's something that doesn't happen very often in this league. Even the perennial teams that you see towards the top don't often have the kind of start Kentucky did. So it's been an incredible ride to watch this team go on this year.
When you look at this team from an offensive standpoint, they're not one that's going to kill you with power, but their numbers, especially in SEC play, are nothing short of staggering everywhere else. Best batting average, on base percentage, second in slugging. Can you speak to the plate discipline this team has and the ability to just make solid contact and find ways to get on base?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just see a lineup full of veteran guys, and they all have a winning mentality or come from a winning culture. You think about Nick Lopez and Mitchell Daly in the middle of that order. Lopez comes from Southern Cal, which is a historic program in college baseball. You've got Mitchell Daly, who is on a Texas team that's been to Omaha in the College World Series. So they all have winning experience. And then you just have that veteran presence in the lineup, guys who are established. Emilian Petrie and Ryan Waldschmidt are both pro hitters. Grant Smith is a guy who can lay down a bunt 1 minute and then hit a bomb later in the game. We saw him do that with Tennessee. But it is an offense that does a lot of things. They'll steal bases. They'll lay down bunts. And like you say, we've seen them hit their fair share of home runs, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
You mentioned that base stealing, and that is such a big part of this offense, leading the league in that in SEC play by a whole 10 stolen bases over second place Vanderbilt with just 22. How much of a dynamic does that add to this offense, and how much has that been a big part of why they've been so successful this year?
Well, I just think it puts stress on the defense, and that's what Kentucky's trying to do. They're trying to add pressure to the guy on the mound and to the infielders, keep them on their toes. And, even, Tyler, when you just fake like you're going to steal, when you just do that head fake, it forces your infielders into different angles because they know they have to protect the base that you're trying to steal, and it just creates different gaps. It makes it more likely that you're going to be able to find a hole for a base hit. And it's the same reason why Kentucky, they have the threat of laying down bunts, and you'll see them at times fake the bunt. And that'll force the third baseman or the first baseman to come in, creates better angles or tougher angles on the defense. So it's all predicated on putting pressure on the defense and forcing your opponent to make plays. But also, in some ways, it can speed up pitchers and force mistakes from the guy on the mound.
And talking to Darren Hedrick, the play-by-play voice of the Kentucky Wildcats ahead of this weekend series as they come into Founders Park to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Let's switch over to pitching now. You mentioned the transfer portal, going out there and getting a lot of high-caliber talent. One of the guys that South Carolina fans can be very familiar with from Central Connecticut State, Dominic Niemann, who's going to be one of the guys getting the start this weekend. He's somebody that did not face South Carolina a season ago, but really stood out in that regional when they were here taking on the Campbell Camels after South Carolina had beaten them in that first game. What have you seen out of him him, and what can we expect out of him this weekend on the mound?
Yeah, we call him Dominant Dom every once in a while. That's his nickname for some of the outings he's had this year. Nyman has been special in that Saturday role. You're talking about a guy that threw a 3-hit complete game shutout against Alabama. He is coming off a tough start against Tennessee where he didn't make it out of the first inning, but Kentucky expects him to rebound. He's a dog competitor on the mound. He's just going to do whatever it takes to succeed on that particular Saturday. And, you know, coming from the left side, when you look at Kentucky's pitching on Friday night, you're going to see a right-hander. On Saturday, you're going to see a lefty, and then Sunday, you're going to see a right-hander with sink. And so Kentucky just tries to give you different looks and present different challenges. And Nyman, his ability to land all three of his pitches has been really key for him this year. And when he's on, he has been one of the toughest outs in the SEC because the guy knows how to pitch. And like you said, he's been in these big environments with the regionals, and so Nyman has been a huge addition to this weekend rotation.
This staff as a whole, their numbers are pretty interesting. They don't necessarily kill you with strikeouts, but they have the lowest batting average allowed in SEC play. And what exactly are they throwing to these hitters that are just kind of forcing contact but not allowing guys to get on base a whole lot?
Well, it's a staff that's not afraid to pitch to contact at this level, and it's just a philosophy from their pitching coach, Dan Roselle, and the whole staff. They're looking to – they call it being the tip of the spear. They want to set the tone for the entire team on the mound, and they just look to attack, and they're not afraid of contact. And they get a lot of routine fly balls. They get a lot of routine ground outs. And when you have a defense as good as Kentucky's behind the guys on the mound, you don't necessarily have to rack up 10, 12, 25 strikeouts a game. You can let your defense behind you work, and that's what this pitching staff does. They trust their defense to make plays, and so they go on the attack. And if they get strikeouts, great. If they don't, put the ball in play and let the opponent get themselves out.
When you look at this South Carolina team, again, right at 500 in conference play as of right now, but still very high in the RPI, and a lot of the metrics do favor South Carolina, still believed to be a regional host at this point in time. What really stands out to you about this Gamecock team?
I just think they're a dangerous club, Tyler. I mean, you could talk about them being up and down, but they've got a sweep of Vanderbilt. They've got a series win on the road against Florida. You know, obviously Ethan Petrie is one of the top hitters in the league. So I just see a dangerous team, and Kentucky knows coming down here to Founders Park. South Carolina has handled business against Kentucky in this ballpark over the years, and I think they're 34-14 all time against Kentucky here in Columbia. So the Wildcats know they got a fight on their hands. This one's going to be a struggle this weekend between two teams. Kentucky's trying to position themselves to potentially host a Super for the first time and make Omaha, and South Carolina's trying to position themselves to host a regional. So this should be a fun matchup this weekend.
I got to slide one more in here for you. Can't talk to somebody from Kentucky without mentioning basketball. How is everybody adjusting to the Mark Pope era up there in Lexington?
There's a lot of excitement around the Mark Pope era. I think it's just been a breath of fresh air. It's a new voice, and I think they were just getting to a point where the relationship between John Calipari and the fans, it was going to take something spectacular from Coach Cal next year to really get the fan base 100% back on board. I think it was just best for both parties. And, we wish Cal all the best at Arkansas. But the Mark Pope era, everybody's excited. They got a new women's basketball coach in Kenny Brooks. So there is a lot of excitement, and obviously the rumors and reports of transfers and freshmen and all that is cranked up. So even though the baseball season is in full swing, we're getting a lot of basketball coverage right now in the Bluegrass as well.
Well, I know one thing, basketball certainly never sleeps up there in Kentucky. Darren, going to be a lot of excitement out at Founders Park this weekend. Looking forward to this great matchup between two very, very good teams, and hopefully both teams bode well going forward. Certainly appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, no problem, Tyler. Thanks for having me, and we look forward to seeing everybody at Founders Park this weekend.
Absolutely. Again, that is Darren Hedrick, play-by-play voice of the Kentucky Wildcats for baseball. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point on your Friday morning here on The Game. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Friday morning, wrapping up our number 1. Plenty more draft conversation to get into. A guy, intern Joe, going to be joining me coming up in the next hour. He is a Bears fan, so I will get his insight and perspective on what he thinks about Caleb Williams going number 1 overall, and if the Bears can finally have a 4,000-yard passer. It's still staggering to me that in the history of that organization that has literally been around longer than the NFL, that they've yet to have a quarterback to throw for that many yards, but 2, they just haven't had a star quarterback in a very, very long time. We'll get intern Joe's thoughts on that. You know, the NFL has as they do with everything, realize that the draft has become an opportunity to make even more money, to take it to different cities, to move it around, have this block party type atmosphere of the draft and bring in more and more dough as they've been doing these past couple of years. Last night the draft was in Detroit. Thought it was neat. They had all the Lion greats up there. Eminem was out there. That was cool. Got the crowd going. But I had a realization watching last night's draft, and maybe I should have realized that a couple years before. But I don't think the draft is something that I'd really want to go to unless you could promise me I had like a front row seat. Because looking at the way they had it set up last night, and it was the same thing a couple years ago when they were in Nashville as well, where they just basically blocked off the entire street, right? So you had the setup. It was like this big tent thing with all the screens and the stage and stuff, where they were coming out and reading the draft picks. And you had the little, like, I don't know if you would call it like a VIP type area that's very close to the stage underneath like the canopy or whatever. But outside of that, you just had a lot of people standing in the street. And yes, you had like a couple of big screens near the canopy, but there were people that had to have been standing at least a quarter mile away from there, just in this mass horde of people standing in the middle of the street. And to me, that doesn't look very appealing. You know what I mean? Like, I guess it's one of those things where you say, oh, I was at the NFL draft, but like, I don't think you're really experiencing the draft necessarily if you're trying to hear or see things from, a quarter mile away standing in the middle of the street. You know what I mean? It very much, to me, reminds me of like New Year's Eve in Times Square, which if you want a interesting rabbit hole to dive into at some point this weekend, just look up kind of what it takes to be at least in a good spot in Times Square on New Year's Eve. You're having to like get out there 12 hours before. You're having to wear like a diaper. You don't have any food or water or anything like that. Unless you bring it with you. Doesn't sound like a very fun, pleasant experience, but yet every single year, thousands upon thousands of people flock to Times Square so they can experience New Year's Eve in New York City. And like what will continue to happen with the NFL draft, thousands and thousands of people. I guess it's a little bit more local, but I'm sure you have people that do travel in from all over the place because they have like fan bases of every team positioned within that little canopy VIP area. So when that team is making a draft pick, they can show the rabid fans that have their faces painted and all that kind of stuff, yelling into the camera, screaming about whatever pick they end up making. But I imagine for the most part it is pretty local, but you're still going to have a lot of people that do fly out and travel for the NFL draft. And again, if you're just standing in the middle of the street the entire time, that just doesn't appeal to me. Maybe it does to you. Maybe you have a different opinion. That's okay. But unless you can guarantee me something a little more comfortable and accessible to be able to actually experience the draft instead of, again, just kind of standing out on the street, I don't know if that really appeals to me. Maybe you have a different idea. That's certainly okay. Again, I thought it was a good draft overall from the presentation standpoint. Again, very cool that Eminem was out there he was out there to offset the boos of Roger Goodell to open the draft. But again, Roger Goodell gets booed every time he shows his face up there on the stage, which is one of my favorite things about the draft. I enjoy it a little bit less now because he's become very aware of it and he plays into it. Like even the little like video they did prior to everybody coming out on stage, Eminem basically says, they're still going to boo you, right? And he's like, yeah, I know. It was, to me, it was a little bit more fun when he was, not that he was not aware, but didn't play into it as much, because now it's almost kind of like a running gag about how much he's going to get booed at the draft. But again, that's just kind of being nitpicky more than anything else. I'm excited to see the rest of the draft going on this weekend. Obviously excited to see where Spencer Rattler is going to end up going. He is being valued by Mel Kiper right now as the next best available quarterback. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, in the next couple of rounds that do end up coming up tonight. And we'll see how the rest of the Gamecocks fare as the weekend goes along. Again, Gargiulo has a shot at getting drafted. Trey Knox, maybe Marcellus Dial, maybe we'll see. But again, we'll see what happens as the next couple rounds happen over the course of the weekend. Then opportunity for some guys to get picked up as undrafted free agents as well. And you can still certainly enjoy a good career at the next level, even if you come in as an undrafted free agent. That'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up next, as I mentioned, our guy, intern Joe, as he does each and every Friday from Gamecock Central, going to be checking in with us for a couple segments. We'll get his thoughts on Caleb Williams being picked at number 1 by his Chicago Bears. Again, that's coming up next, hour number 2 of the Extra Point here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Friday morning. Plenty of draft reaction to get to as the morning rolls along. Of course, first round of the NFL draft in the books last night. And, of course, we are so proud of Xavier Legette for coming in at number 32, being a first-round draft selection just up the road for the Carolina Panthers. Getting more thoughts on the NFL draft. We'll get to some of his thoughts on the Bears in just a second. Our guy, intern Joe, joining us on the Love Chevrolet phone lines this Friday. Joe, I think we were all, if you were awake, I know some of the people may have gone to bed, but if you were awake, what was your reaction to seeing X go right at the end of the first round last night?
Yeah, Tyler, my first reaction was that accent is going nowhere, being drafted by the Panthers. Happy for XL, really good kid, really hard worker, gets to stay pretty close to home and play in front of, a lot of his friends and family. So really good situation for the kid, and really excited to get to watch him play a little bit closer to home.
It's funny you mentioned, it not going anywhere, because when you look at some of the draft projections and teams that were looking to pick a wide receiver towards the end of the first round, and those teams actually ended up doing that, or like Kansas City ended up getting Xavier Worthy. Buffalo looking for a wide receiver pick, they ended up trading the pick that allowed the Panthers to get in at number 32. They'll go to number 33, number 1 in the second round coming up later tonight. But I was thinking, man, how would X fare in a place like Kansas City or a place like Buffalo where, it could be like that playoff game, negative degrees outside and covered in snow. I don't know if he's necessarily too keen on those elements. So good to see he's going to be able to stay in the Southeast, at least for now.
Yeah, Tyler, the draft is always funny when a lot of Southern guys get picked up in these Northern teams in these cold weather. I think XL would have figured it out, but definitely wouldn't have been ideal. And then, with regards to the Chiefs and the Bills, your mind starts to wander a little bit as, you start to get down there towards those playoff teams. Would he be a good fit? And I think Kansas City, Buffalo, even he would have been able to, compete in the wide receiver room, maybe even earn himself, a number 1 or a number 2 job. But again, staying home with the Panthers, still a good fit for XL. Again, I think, he's going to do a lot of great things in this just kind of raw, program and regime that they have up there in Charlotte.
And of course, the Panthers have been kind of a mess these past couple of years. There's no two ways about it. There's a reason they've been cycling through head coaches ad nauseum, and Dave Canales comes in as another one this year. But, there was one need that really stuck out above so many of the other ones that they have, and that was the ability to have somebody young and fresh for Bryce Young to throw to. As I mentioned last hour, Adam Thielen was a great receiver in his day at Minnesota, but he is certainly over the hill in terms of being a number 1 guy. So he wasn't the most viable option. So bringing a guy like Xavier Legette to shore up that wide receiver room a little bit, in addition to whatever else they end up drafting over the course of the next couple days, is hopefully for Panthers fans the start of where they need to be a sustainable, successful franchise in the NFL going forward.
Yeah, exactly, Tyler. And, I think, Panthers fans are happy, South Carolina fans are happy. And, they didn't screw it up, right, this year. So, they're not the butt end of the joke. Xavier Legette is a real talent, and people are, kind of patting the Panthers on the back. So, maybe it's the start of a turnaround up there in Carolina, too. And, again, I really hope for XL's sake that things go well with Bryce Young and the new regime gets off to a slower and a lot more steady start than last season did. And, that they find a groove. And I think XL is perfect to be, playing with a guy like Bryce Young. XL just brings so much to the table. It's hard not to get excited if you're a young quarterback.
Well, that was the end of last night's draft. The beginning of last night's draft was of particular intrigue to you because you are, of course, a Chicago Bears fan. It's very weird. And look, I've been in the position where the Atlanta Falcons have had high picks in the NFL draft, where you kind of know pretty much what they're going to pick. In the weeks and months leading up to it. What is your thought leading up to the draft on them selecting Caleb Williams and then seeing it come to fruition last night?
Yeah, it was one of those situations where, after you traded Justin Fields, it was exactly what you had to do in that situation. And I think it made the most sense for the Bears, right? To grab a guy like Caleb Williams at 1. You didn't really have any other options, especially with a quarterback year like this. You take a guy like that with that much, upside, and then you surround him with talent, right? I think that's what's worked in the past. And I look at Justin Herbert's rookie year, and they surrounded him with Keenan Allen and a little bit of a defense, and they made some noise that first season. So I like what the Bears are doing. I think Caleb Williams is really talented. Do I think he's the complete and whole package for the next 10, 15 years? No, but, is he the best that we're going to get in that certain situation? Yeah. And, it stinks because if Spencer Rattler gets picked and there is a revenge game, if you will, somewhere in the NFL future, like I will be rooting for Spencer, unfortunately. But, I mean, I think, as a Bears fan, I'm ecstatic because it's the brightest future we've had in years. I think Odunze at 9 was, a steal, and it's a really bright future for the Bears. But, I don't know. I was a little bummed moving on from Justin Fields, and, but it was needed, and that's just the way the business is. And ready to, ride on with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, a lot of exciting offensive talent, picked last night.
And it's an interesting position that the Bears are put in because, of course, they have the number 1 overall pick because the Panthers traded it away to them last year so they could move up and get Bryce Young. So the Bears are not your quintessential team picking first overall. They ended up having a mediocre to okay season. They were 7-10 a season ago, so it's not like they went 1-16 or something like that. And when you look at the pieces that they have already, you have DJ Moore, leading receiver from season ago, Cole Kmet, very solid tight end. The offensive line, I know, is a little bit banged up. If those guys can stay healthy this season, they should be, for the most part, okay up front. And then you add Rome Odunze to the mix, like Caleb Williams, as opposed to many other first overall quarterbacks being taken, like Bryce Young a season ago. He's not exactly going into a bare cupboard up there in Chicago. He has some stuff that can genuinely make you excited about what he's going to be able to do there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure Panther fans are tired of hearing about the trade for the number 1 overall pick and everything that the Bears have gotten. But shout out to my guy Kev Roche for sending the whole details to me, my fellow Bears fan out there. But yeah, I mean, I think the Bears got a haul for that number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young, and thankfully Panthers fans are turning the page. But again, I think with Caleb Williams, it's the surefire thing. I don't think you were going to pick anyone else at 1. And so it's the situation. And again, you've got talent around him, which is the exciting thing, right? I think that's kind of what you need to do with such a dynamic rookie. And, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore can all ball. So we'll see. And then you also have, a couple tackles. Your offense looks, really good. And then you have Montez Sweat on the defensive end. So I don't know. We'll see. I try not to get too excited about the Bears because, whenever I do, that team up in Green Bay decides to rip my heart out again. So, I try to stay pretty even keel. But, golly, it's the most excited I've been about the Bears in quite a while.
Well, I was going to say, you may not have to worry about as much about the team in Green Bay as you have to worry about the team in Detroit now.
Yeah. The Lions, they've always been great, Dan Campbell, and it's been crazy because you've been almost like rooting for them a little bit because, I'm not going to root for the Packers when the Bears are down, but the Lions, new face in the division, and the Vikings are, you can't really root for them because they haven't been as bad for as long. But yeah, the Lions, it's hard not to like Dan Campbell, man. So if it's us and the Lions competing for the division, no qualms there. It'll just be a friendly Midwestern NFC North. When we're vying for that title, if that's what things come to.
I do have to ask your thoughts because there's been a lot of, I don't want to say blowback, but a lot of skepticism as far as Caleb Williams goes from a personality standpoint. He's a different kind of guy, does the painting fingernails, was, crying in his mom's arms after they lost the, what game was that? To whoever at the end of the regular season last year that kind of eliminated them from Pac-12 and college football playoff contention. But what are your thoughts about the different type of guy that Caleb Williams is as he comes into the Bears organization?
Yeah, I hate to say that, he's Gen Z and just, really personable and just, out there and doesn't really care what other people think. But I think that's it, right? He's the first Gen Z quarterback and, just really doesn't care what other people think. And I think that's one of his talents, I guess. And it's good. I'm with it. Again, he's one of, our generation. So, I certainly understand it. In the crying after games, I understand the emotion and all that stuff. And, different players are different nowadays, right? And I think, it certainly has rubbed some people the wrong way. But I mean, as somebody who's kind of been seeing a few things and been through, I think, showing personality is a good thing. And that's just kind of how Caleb does it, right? He's been in LA for a couple of years. I think, that can happen sometimes. So, I mean, he'll be in Chicago, and I think, showing some personality, it's good, right? It means he's being himself, it means he feels like himself. So, I mean, I have no qualms with it. I never really did, and, I'm all for, showing the personality, whatever that may be, right? If that helps you be a better football player, go for it. So, I'm certainly with it, and I think, as a leader, I've heard all positive things. I guess the only concern areas, I mean, the battle at Oklahoma with Spencer. Mm-hmm. But again, I told you, as I mentioned on this show, like if there ever comes for a revenge game for Spencer, I have to root against the Bears, unfortunately. At least for once. But, other than that, I mean, I think, I'm confident, right? Again, like I mentioned, I think it's just the guy that we had to take with the pick. So we're here.
I think it's going to be interesting to see because, look, Chicago is one of the biggest media markets in all of America, and it's a tough place to deal with the media sometimes. And, look, everything's sunshine and rainbows right now. Everybody very excited of what Caleb Williams is going to bring to the field. If things start trending in the other direction, if he is not hot right out of the gate, maybe struggles a little bit, maybe needs a little bit more time to develop, I'm going to be interested to see how quick, especially given the fact that he's a different type of guy, quirky personality, Gen Z, as you mentioned, how quick people might turn on him if things aren't going well.
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing. That's the part about Chicago, right? And the city's been longing for just a quarterback for a long time. I mean, it feels like the Jay Cutler days, and Rex Grossman. We've been waiting. So I don't know. I mean, I think the city, this year kind of depends. Like if this year goes south, you can kind of blame the coach and for Bayern and Eberflus, I think is the finger to be pointed at. And then, I mean, I would think, you either fire him or make a change somewhere at the top. And then, if that doesn't work, then yeah, I would start pointing the finger at Williams. You give him, I guess, like a year or two leash of development. And I guess Chicago's not really used to this, right? Really turning around on development, especially with a guy like Williams who's so dynamic and so, talented, right? There's no question about it. Like compared to Mitch Trubisky, there was a little bit of question about development, Justin Fields as well. So, I mean, I think there will be a year or two at the very least. But again, as you mentioned, Tyler, the media market in Chicago's, it's certainly not an easy one. But I think Caleb's prepared. He's media trained and all that. So if things go south, I mean, they'll figure it out.
Well, he was the first quarterback off the board, one of 6 to be taken in the first round. All of them went in the first half of the first round. Very quarterback-heavy draft this year. Joe, coming up next, I want to play a game with you, one of my favorite games to play on the radio. It's called Above, Below, or In Between, as we try and figure out who's going to have the most successful career of all the quarterbacks drafted last night. That is coming up next. It is The Extra Point. He is intern Joe, joining me as he does each and every Friday. I'm Tyler Head with you here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Intern Joe hanging out for a couple segments, as he does each and every Friday, as we go through and react to what we saw in last night's first round of the NFL draft. As I mentioned, a lot of quarterbacks taken really in the first half of last night's draft. In fact, the entire first half of the draft was all offensive players. It took a while for the first defensive guy to come off the board. I think that speaks volumes to where the NFL is these days. But a lot of teams decided to go with quarterbacks, and I think today would be the perfect opportunity to play what is one of my favorite games to play on the radio. That is above, below, or in between. Now, Joe, I've never played this with you before, but it's real simple. I'm going to, and we're both going to have our own list here. I'm essentially going to give you a name, and after we get to the second name, you will take that name and determine if they are above, below, or in between the other names that are on the list. So basically, we're deciding who is going to have the more successful career in the NFL based on the 6 quarterbacks taken in last night's draft, or last night's first round of the draft. And the reason I bring this up, I talked about this yesterday. Pete Prisco of CBS Sports made an interesting point when talking about his mock draft the other day. He said, take 5 quarterbacks in the first round of a draft. One's usually going to be great, one's going to be okay, one's going to be a backup, and 2 are usually going to be bust. So by that metric, that means one of these guys should have a great career, one should be okay, maybe 1 or 2 are backups, and then 3 end up being bust. So we're going to see if we can figure out who the best quarterbacks are going to be in the future going forward. Sound good?
Yeah, it works for me, Tyler.
So I'm not exactly going to go in order here, just kind of throw them at you randomly so we can kind of mix up this list a little bit. We'll start off with the guy that ended up going number 2nd overall in the draft last night, Jayden Daniels, to the Washington Commanders. That's going to be our baseline. So we'll start off with Jayden Daniels, and then the second option, so you'll determine if this guy is above, below, or in between Jayden Daniels, that being the team, the pick that my Falcons made at the number 8 overall, Michael Penix Jr. to the Atlanta Falcons.
I'm going to go below Jayden Daniels because, I think Penix has to sit behind Kirk Cousins, right? He's going to be older by the time the Kirk Cousins deal is up. Out of all the quarterbacks, Tyler, I don't know. As unfortunate as I had to say it for your Falcons, that one did not make as much sense as the other ones did.
And hey, I don't know if you got to listen in the first hour, but I was completely blown away by that decision myself. Falcons needed help on the defensive edge, specifically need some help getting to the quarterbacks. They've suffered from that the past couple of years. You just signed Kirk Cousins to a 9-figure deal a month ago, which apparently he wasn't even privy to this pick being made last night until it was actually made. So I don't think the Raheem Morris era is off to the hottest start right now, but I'll agree with you. I think Penix does go below JT Daniels in terms of future success in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, that speaks more to Jayden Daniels. I think Jayden Daniels is a stud, but Penix just got to go below Jayden Daniels for this one.
And Jayden Daniels, there was speculation that he may try and pull the Eli Manning or the John Elway and say, I know you want to take me at second, but I'm not going to play for you, and try and politic his way around. But it seems like he's content to head up there to Washington and play for Dan Quinn. Now, the Commanders do have a lot of equity in the draft to be able to build a lot around him, so there's a lot of potential for upside for him.
Yeah, and I think, new owner too, new regime, like it's a fresh start in Washington, and I think it'll be good for the league, right? I think just kind of a fresh start in that whole situation there will be good, and Jayden Daniels and Dan Quinn leading the helm. I think Dan Quinn's a good head coach, good players coach. Seem to like him, so I'm all for it. I think Jayden Daniels will have a lot of success in Washington.
All right, let's get to our third option here on above, below, or in between. We'll go with the last quarterback picked last night, that being Bo Nix going to the Denver Broncos, who, of course, moved on from Russell Wilson, sent him off to the Steelers. They brought in Zach Wilson from the Jets. I don't think that's going to be too much of a competition, but Bo Nix, seemingly the quarterback of the future out there in Denver, above, below, or in between our list that already includes Jayden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr.
I'm going to go below both of those guys, too. I don't think, Bo Nix is as good as the rest of them, which reflects his draft position. I think he's a little bit undersized. And I'm not convinced the Broncos are done taking quarterbacks either. I have a feeling that they're going to add a guy later in the draft to add some competition and to maybe beat out a guy like Bo Nix. But, again, out of all the quarterbacks in the first round, I think Bo Nix and Penix are probably the bottom tier. But I mean, we'll see. Coming out of Oregon, good college quarterback. We'll see if it translates.
I think I'm going to go with him between Daniels and Michael Penix Jr. Penix's injury history concerns me a lot. And look, he's an older quarterback anyway. He's not going to be theoretically starting for the Falcons until he's 26 or 27. So, Bo Nix played a lot of college ball, did have the knee injury at Auburn, but doesn't have quite the history of injuries that Michael Penix Jr. has. And I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be an easy road for him out there in Denver. But for the time being, I will put him between Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, I'm with it.
Go to option number 4 here, third overall pick in the draft last night. People weren't sure where exactly he would land. He was somebody that was projected to maybe be the top pick overall going into the season, but Drake May ends up with the New England Patriots at the number 3 overall pick. Our list includes Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix Jr. Where does Drake May slot in for you?
I think Drake May slots between Penix and Nix, and that's crazy. I feel like that's crazy to be saying. And now that I actually think about it, but I'm going to stick with it because, even though Penix has to overcome, the injury history and then behind Kirk Cousins, I think Drake May, really raw athletic talent, but he's missing some things that make an NFL quarterback an NFL quarterback. Bill Belichick on the broadcast, I don't know whether that was him taking a shot at his former organization or if he really felt that Drake May wasn't quite ready to be an NFL quarterback yet, but that was concerning. And I think in New England, a place where, they certainly have developed pro-style quarterbacks in the past, but as of late, they haven't really had as much success. Yuva's not going to like it, but I don't think Drake May is going to be the guy. I think they're just going to have to recycle, do this quarterback process, go recycle quarterbacks, draft another one. I unfortunately don't think Drake May is going to be the guy for them either.
I will slot him in between Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, so he's second on my list as of right now. He'll come up in third on your list. There's a lot of development that needs to be done. Again, he kind of, waned a little bit as time went on in his college career in the eyes of NFL scouts. Again, still number 3 overall, but definitely not a finished product by any means. Does need a little bit more time to develop, and we'll see how that goes. In addition to having a new regime up there with Jared Mayo as the new head coach. So 4 done already. 2 more to go here. We'll go J.J. McCarthy, who ended up getting selected by the Minnesota Vikings last night. This is a big question mark because we saw so little of him in his college career and far in terms of having to really go out there and prove himself at the quarterback spot. Obviously very successful, won the national championship, won a lot of games in his college career, but still a lot we don't know about J.J. McCarthy just yet.
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy is an interesting one too. I'm going to slot him between Bo Nix Bo Nix and Drake May, I think. Yep. Yeah, I think I like him right there. I think Drake May is going to be a better quarterback. I think, Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy were, I guess, the bottom tier of all the quarterbacks taken. Not a whole lot of game tape on McCarthy. He's a Michigan man. And again, I think, same level of, hype for Bo Nix, if you will. Even though we've seen a lot more tape with Bo Nix, the NFL comparison doesn't necessarily go as far with McCarthy. Not as much tape, but if there was, there might be a little bit more of an NFL comparison. So I don't know. I don't think McCarthy is a first-round quarterback. I don't think Bo Nix is a first-round quarterback either. But these teams reached, and I don't foresee McCarthy's NFL future. I could see him being a backup, bounce around for a little bit, but certainly not a Super Bowl winner.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp as you. I'm going to put him at the very bottom of my list, so below Michael Penix at number 5 right now. I don't know enough about him to know how that's going to translate to the NFL. Now, again, Jim Harbaugh spoke at length about how great he was and how good he was going to be at the next level, and it's going to have to be a wait and see right now, but because I can't definitively say how good he's going to be at this moment.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think had he had maybe a year or two at Michigan, to develop a little bit more, he'd be a little bit better. But again, he decided to go to the draft, and his head coach was leaving, and obviously we know about what's going on at Michigan and just the mass exodus that was there. So McCarthy, gets drafted. We'll see what his NFL future holds. But I'm not holding any hope necessarily.
And last one quickly here to wrap up the segment. Of course, Caleb Williams, number 1 overall to the Chicago Bears. Where does he fall on your list?
I am gonna put him above Jaden Daniels. Obviously, as a Bears fan, a little bit of bias here and whatever. I think just with logic and whatnot. And he's the number 1 overall pick for a reason. Do I think he's a potential Super Bowl winner? Maybe. But I know there's some good football coming to Chicago, and I mean it's the closest thing. I mean they haven't played any football yet, which is crazy, right? And again, like I mentioned, I'm trying not to get too excited as a Bears fan because usually when they start playing football, it doesn't turn out too well for us. But I think he's going to win some football games at the very least. So I got to slot him above Jaden Daniels, and again, I think Daniels and Williams are going to be the two dudes for sure from this draft.
I agree with you. I'm going to put them at the top of my list, and I have to save this. We'll revisit it in about 10 years, and these guys have been in the league for a long time and see how that pans out. But your final list goes Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr., Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, and then Bo Nix. I also went Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., and then J.J. McCarthy rounding out my list. So we'll see how that all works out. Again, we're just kind of projecting now because we haven't seen them actually play in the NFL, so we'll see what happens as the future unfolds. We'll talk some Gamecock baseball coming up next. Coach Kingston talked to the media yesterday ahead of this weekend series against Kentucky. We'll talk about that next here on the Extra Point on the Game.
Yeah, I love it. I'm with it. Like I said, dude, like I can't talk shit as a Bears fan anymore because like as soon as they start playing football, it usually doesn't turn out well. So, like not only are the Philly kids that I play Xbox with Philadelphia fans and just a-holes in general, but a couple of them are Packers fans too. So.
Well, welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, intern Joe, hanging out as he does each and every Friday. And, of course, we always got to talk some Gamecock baseball. Huge series coming up this weekend, as every series seems like it's been huge so far this season. Taking on the number 4 Kentucky Wildcats out at Founders Park. Game number 1 coming up tonight, 7 o'clock first pitch, pregame coverage starting at 6:45 right here on the game. 6 o'clock first pitch tomorrow, and then a 3 o'clock first pitch coming up on Sunday. As Joe, we've talked so much about this team this year, and from an eye test perspective, it feels like they're worse than they are, but they're still up in the top 15 in RPI. They're still projected to host a regional if the season were to end today. Like, this team is still, in the grand scheme of things, really, really good. But unfortunately, especially when you've lost as many series as you have up to this point, it doesn't quite feel that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't. And, I mean, I think things with Gamecock baseball are getting a little negative, and obviously rightfully so, right? They're not playing their best baseball. You let a couple games slip away in that Arkansas series that you could have won. I think you could have won that Friday night game. So, I mean, obviously it's disappointing stuff. They got to turn something around. I mean, a lot of things are going right, but then the things that are going wrong are costing them games. So certainly a lot of negativity flying around. They got a big chance this weekend to turn things around and silence a lot of the doubt that's out there right now.
Well, one of the big things they had going for them as of late was Will Tippett really turning it on at the plate. And we know he's been a great glove out in the field this entire season, but he finally kind of figured out things at the plate when he stopped switch hitting, and they focused on him being a righty, and unfortunately suffers the concussion this past weekend. According to Coach Kingston yesterday, not going to be able to go this weekend. I will give Lee Ellis credit. He did a really good job, went 3 of 6 this past weekend against Arkansas, but man, you just really felt like Tippett was on the cusp of something special, and you hated to lose him at such a critical time this season.
Yeah, it sucks. Chief Tippett has been playing really, really good baseball as of late. And then, with a concussion, I mean, it's just kind of one of those wild things. I believe it was from that hit by pitch, too. So, it's one of those unfortunate things. But he'll be back. And, I mean, Lee Ellis is a really, really good replacement, true freshman. Coming in, he had a really good fall, was competing for the starting job, and then kind of faded off a little bit in the spring. As Tippett started to play a lot better. But, yeah, Lee Ellis is a pretty good replacement. Needs to keep it up this weekend, but, was really, really good last weekend. And again, I think, he's a freshman with a lot of talent, playing with some stuff to prove, obviously, for the future. He wants to be the shortstop of the future for this South Carolina baseball team. So we'll see this weekend. If he steps up, has a big weekend, certainly make it hard to throw Chief Tippett back there. But, it'll be a decision for Coach Kingston. But I think Lee Ellis is certainly a guy that's capable of filling in.
I want to get to some of these cuts from Coach Kingston yesterday, talking to the media, previewing the series against Kentucky. And one thing Kentucky does really, really well, that they're very good in a lot of offensive categories, is they steal bags. Really, really good. They're the best in the SEC in doing so. Here is Coach Kingston yesterday talking about minimizing the Wildcats' ability to steal bases this weekend.
Well, I think there's certain things that you just do in general to try to minimize the stolen base against you, but I think you probably need to have a little bit more heightened awareness. You need to make sure the other team knows that you're going to be aware that that's one of their weapons. And so does that mean we pick off more? Does that mean we're quicker to the plate and use more slide steps? It'll be a little bit of everything, but just know that we are aware of it, and we will be prepared throughout the week, and you hope that you can do a good job of making sure that's not a part of the game that really hurts you.
And a couple of their guys higher up in the lineup in Emilian Petrie and Ryan Waldschmidt. Very good at stealing bases, as well as their catcher Devin Burks down at the bottom of that lineup. So you got threats all up and down the lineup for the ability to steal bags. Cole Messina, a lot of importance can be placed on him this weekend. He is legitimately one of the best catchers in the country, and he's probably going to have to go out there and prove it once again this weekend against this Kentucky team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big weekend for Moose, right? I think, obviously with the bat in his hands, and then obviously too defensively, I think it's going to be a big weekend for the kid. Because, last weekend they were just walking him, right? Arkansas, they had mentioned that, they aren't going to let Cole Messina beat him. They had a game plan for Ethan Petrie. I think Elijah Campbell was mentioning this on my show. But, they had a game plan for Ethan Petrie, but then, they didn't want Cole Messina to beat him. So I think at the plate, the Moose is certainly due, and he's certainly chomping at the bit because he's been hitting well. But then defensively too, right? I mean, Tyler, you mentioned it. Those steal numbers just jump off the page. They have 3 guys that have over 14 steals, 2 of them with 14, and then 1 of them with 19. So they're going to be swiping a lot of bags. Moose just needs to play quarterback and really trust his arm because, I mean, it's one of the best in the country. He is the best catcher in the country in my eyes. I mean, he's a complete package. So you just need a big weekend out of him. And he's frustrated, as I'm sure a lot of guys are with the way that they've been playing. So this should be a pretty big weekend from Moose. And I know Founders Park, I mean, we talked about, them swiping bags, bunting too. They're a really good fundamental baseball team. Reminds me a lot about Vanderbilt, but I think Founders Park, needs to be a tough place to play this weekend if you want to also have some success.
Last weekend against Arkansas, despite the fact that South Carolina did drop the series, I think we all came away from it feeling like they had a good option as far as their weekend rotation went, with Kimball on Friday, Jones on Saturday, and then Dylan Eskew getting the start on Sunday. Now, Kimball ended up having to leave a little bit early because he had the blister on his hand. That seems to be cleared up and okay, and they're going to be going kind of with the same options this weekend with Kimball on Friday, Jones on Saturday. It's still listed as TBA on Sunday, but I imagine as long as you're not using him out of the bullpen in those first 2 games, you're still going to give Eskew a start on Sunday if it ends up working out that way.
Yeah, the rotation, I mean, same goes. One thing that I liked with the way that they did this rotation was who they paired up. I think Ty Good's great coming out of the bullpen off of a Roman Kimball. And then I also like Matthew Becker coming in after Eli Jones, right? I think, there's a little bit in those duos there that I liked last weekend, and maybe Kingston changes up, maybe he doesn't. But I liked what I saw. Obviously, Kimball, I think the blister was just one of those things where, he just hadn't been prepping like a starter, coming out of the bullpen. Your preparation's a little different, so I think it was just a matter of throwing a little bit too much, prepping as a starter. So it'll be fine. I mean, I think for what it was, he looked pretty good. Let a couple base runners on. His control wasn't completely there, but again, I think it's just a development thing, getting back used to starting for Roman Kimball. So I'm excited to see what he can bring on Friday night. As we mentioned last week, I think he's the perfect guy. For that Friday slot, brings a lot of energy to go out there and hopefully win one. And hopefully this weekend he brings a little bit more length. Same goes for Eli Jones. Usually a really strong and steady pitcher, but you need length out of these starters, and Dylan Eskew alike probably going on Sunday as well. But length is what you need out of these starters this weekend. And hopefully the bats can get you going and get these starters out of there with a win too, because I mean, if you have length and the offense gets going, it should end up with a win for some of these starting pitchers.
And last one quickly here as we wrap up this segment. This is obviously a huge series. Welcoming in a top 5 team is always going to be a big deal. But I go back to this past weekend series against Arkansas. Terry and I talked about this yesterday. There just seemed to be some apathy with the crowd. Like it was hard for them to get up and get excited. And maybe that has to do with the fact that the season just hasn't played out the way that they thought it was going to. And I can't think of a better way to kind of get people juiced back up than being able to take at least 2 games against a very good Kentucky team this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were a lot of Arkansas fans at Founders Park last weekend as well. But, I think, if any weekend Founders Park could show its true colors, it's this one. It's graduation weekend. It's supposed to be a beautiful weekend, big school. Kentucky, obviously not as big of a baseball powerhouse as in Arkansas per se, but still a really good team. Number 2 team in the country, I believe, is the consensus where they're ranked. So Founders Park needs to be electric. I mean, it hasn't been up to its full standard, consistently throughout the year. It's been good in spots and it's been bad in spots. So I fully expect Founders Park to be back and fully in action, especially with this weekend. It's supposed to be a beautiful grad weekend. Get out and catch a game.
Again, first pitch coming up tonight, 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 6:45 right here on the game. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. A couple funny things happening in and around the draft last night that I want to get to, as he's intern Joe joining me as he does each and every Friday. Tyler Head along with you here on The Extra Point on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you. Along on this Friday, intern Joe hanging out with me for a couple more minutes, talking plenty of NFL draft from last night's round one. Again, Caleb Williams going number 1 overall to his Chicago Bears, and then round number 1 wrapping up with Xavier Legette being selected by the team just up the road, that being the Carolina Panthers. But as happens every single year, maybe not always in the first round of the draft, but usually over the course of 7 rounds, funny things just happen when you're watching the draft, like quirky things, weird things, especially that year they did it during COVID and people were at their homes and Bill Belichick's dog made a pick in one of the rounds of the draft, and weird things happen. One of the ones that really sticks out to me, and again, for anybody that listens to this show or listens to me on air here, knows I'm a big wrestling fan. Tony Khan, who is the son of Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tony Khan is the owner of All Elite Wrestling, which is a professional wrestling promotion. They have a show on Wednesday nights called AEW Dynamite. And on Wednesday night, he took a pile driver at the end of their show, which again is in wrestling terminology is a move that is supposed to hurt your neck really bad. So people were wondering if he was going to show up to the draft selling his injury, right? Like he was legitimately not hurt in this, encounter, but in the storyline of what happened on Wednesday night, he was. And man, he did not disappoint. When they showed that Jaguars draft room, it wasn't like one of the plastic ones. It was one of the loose, soft ones. But man had a neck collar on in that draft room. I respect the hustle. I respect sticking to telling the stories of wrestling. I love to see that last night.
Yeah, Tyler, it's good for the brand, right? I think it's awesome. I think pro wrestling it's blowing up in this, modern age of media, and it's certainly turning a corner too, especially with everything that's happened at the WWE. But yeah, Tony Khan, shout out. I think that's hilarious. I think it's awesome. I'm all for it. I think, wrestling is one of the cooler things, cooler sports that we have in the industry. And so, yeah, shout out to Tony Khan, man. That was awesome.
Now, I did see somebody on the Pat McAfee broadcast of the draft last night that said, if you're going to sell that, don't turn your neck. Stand there or sit there kind of stoically like your neck is actually hurt. Because he was kind of turning around, moving around like it wasn't ailing him. So maybe the acting needs to be ticked up just a little degree.
Yeah, just a little bit. It's hard because, in the draft room, you're not sure how many what camera, NFL Network, who's got you on. So it's hard when you don't know what cameras you're going to be, playing into. But, yeah, again, I think it's awesome. Really, really cool that he's, playing into it and everything. And, that's how you sell a wrestling company, too. Doing a great job with it.
One more thing I want to get to. This didn't necessarily happen at the draft last night, but happened leading up to the draft. There's a restaurant in Charlotte called Dilworth Neighborhood Grill, and they had a sign outside in reference to the Carolina Panthers that said, "Please let the coach and GM pick this year." And that is a direct shot at Panthers owner David Tepper, who's been known as one of the worst owners in the NFL. And apparently, David Tepper paid a visit to this restaurant last night because he was so... he was not visibly upset, but he was clearly upset enough to go in there and say something to the restaurant's owner for putting this message out there against him. Bro, what are you doing? Why are you even giving attention to something like this? They're not wrong for pointing this out, but why are you, as a billionaire owner in the NFL, concerned with what a local restaurant is saying about you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, David Tepper needs to learn the lesson of if you don't give it attention, people won't pick up on it. You kind of just need to let it run by the wayside and be, a stoic owner, kind of like the rest of the league, and not be as involved in the headlines. I think he's still learning that lesson a little bit, but smart man made all of his money, doing it himself. So I don't know, interesting cat up there, and again, I think if he would have left it alone, it probably would have been fine.
Yeah, well, I guess at least he didn't go in there and throw a drink at somebody because we know he's been known to do that. So at least he didn't make that mistake, I guess.
Yeah, no, I know for real. At least drafting Xavier Legette is the headline. For the Panthers last night, and thankfully that's the leading news for the Panthers. It's been a rough go as of late.
And again, I'm so excited that Xavier Legette's going to get the opportunity to go to the Panthers, but man, I just really hope this team is managed well and he can have a successful career up there. And somebody did bring up the point earlier that, hey, just because he gets drafted by the Panthers doesn't mean he's going to spend his entire career there. That is very true, but I just hope that, a bad organization like that doesn't end up chewing him and spitting him out like it has done for so many players, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know, and that was kind of the, I guess, unfortunate thing of the Panthers drafting him. He could have ended up at a place like Buffalo or Kansas City, and we were having this conversation. I think he could have made a run at Rashee Rice at least within the year for that starting job in Kansas City. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's to XL's benefit. He's close to home and everything, and if it be he may wind up somewhere else. So be it. I think Xavier Legette's going to be fine wherever he ends up. The kid always lands on his feet.
Well, absolutely, and again, we're just excited that he got drafted, especially in the first round, and excited to see what he's going to be able to do up the road in Carolina. Joe, appreciate it as always. We'll try and get you back in studio coming up next week, as hopefully we're talking about another good baseball series coming away from this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Appreciate you having me as always. Looking forward to joining you next week.
Absolutely. Intern Joe, as he is each and every Friday, joining us here on The Extra Point. That will do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, Wes, and Chris will continue to dive into what we saw in last night's draft and Xavier Legette going in the first round to the Carolina Panthers. Again, that's all coming up next right here on The Game.